Hello to you all, and thank you to everybody that's attended this webinar today. My name is Matt, and I'll be your host for today's session. And we're going to actually look into how people are becoming net zero, being more sustainable across the wholesale sector. So we've got a few guests to join with me today. Before we go into the actual introductions of our lovely guests, please feel free to ask any questions you can throughout this session. So I'll just give you an idea of the agenda for today's webinar. So the first 25 to 30 minutes will be me asking the panel a couple of questions. So we'll be able to hear their responses to those. The second stage will be sort of 10 to 15 minutes of a Q&A session. So if you actually hover over your screen, you'll see a Q&A icon at the bottom of your page. So you can use that function to write in any question, direct it to anybody you want to. It can be a couple of people, it can be all of them, or it can just be to one. So I'll get through as many questions as I can in that section of the webinar. If we don't get through all questions, we will get back to you with a response as soon as we can. Okay, so now the reason we chose this topic is because there's a big drive and focus around the world actually to be more sustainable and to be net zero. So from this, many organisations are changing, modifying, or introducing new practices to achieve this, really. So we're going to explore our panel's views and what their respective companies and their members' organisations are currently doing or intend to do to be more sustainable. So I'm delighted to be joined by three guest speakers today from the industry, one from a leading representative body, one from a major bottling production company, and one from a well-established technology supplier into the food and drink market, an actual colleague of mine. So we'll share their views and thoughts on where they see themselves and what their intentions are going forward. So let's introduce our panel to get them to introduce themselves a little bit more. So, well, ladies first. So Barbara, can you please introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, and it's great to be here. I am Barbara Russell-Scott. I'm the Managing Director of Young Spirits. Young Spirits is a modern drinks company based in Edinburgh. We have our own brands, Fergus Harris, Uhuru and Nips and Sips, and we've actually been carbon neutral since 2023.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Clive, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Matt, and good afternoon to everybody that's joined us. So I'm Clive Brady. I am chairman of the Bonded Warehouse Keepers Association. So we have in excess of 140 members across many sectors in the UK. Primarily, though, we are an intermediary in the customs and excise environment and arena. So from a sustainability point of view, I'm no expert. So I'll set that from the outset. But what I bring this afternoon will be kind of comments, experiences, and knowledge from our eclectic membership base. But good to be here.
Sure, thank you, Clive. And last but not least, Richard, please.
Hi, I'm Richard Marshall. I work for Business Computer Projects, BCP. We're a software house that supplies supply chain and warehouse management software to the food and drink sector. I think over the years, we've worked with quite a number of businesses in their kind of sustainability efforts. So hopefully today I might be able to share some of those insights with you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you all. And just to echo Clive, yes, we're not experts on sustainability and being net zero, but this is really just a chance to sort of investigate and discuss what people are looking at the moment in terms of the wholesale sector. Okay, so start with the question one. I'll direct respond to yourself, Clive. So as the BWA has many members across the country, can you give us an insight into some of the changes taking place within some of these member businesses, please?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah, I think, have engaged with the members, and not all of them, but a good few of them. It's a mixed bag, as you would expect. I mean, this is a journey. So, it's a journey to what everybody hopes, or what most people appear to hope, is net zero. Whether we all get there, or some of us do, some of us don't, remains to be seen. But it's very much a journey where, without a doubt, then obviously, certainly from our membership base, there is a desire to reduce greenhouse gases, period. So, we've got some members who have made some small steps, and Richard will touch on small steps a bit later, which is where, they've reduced their travel. When they do travel, they train rather than drive. Some haven't even made any adjustments yet, so few of them, because we go from one man and his warehouse to the likes of substantial PLCs with multiple warehouses. So it's a mixed bag, but I think you know, it is a journey. We've got one particular member that's well down that journey, you know, in terms of predates kind of sustainability, as it were. But I think without a doubt, what's interesting, there's obviously drivers around why you want to reduce your greenhouse emissions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Feel the moral obligation, the duty of care. But there are opportunities in pursuing that path. And that's what's come back from me, you know, the financial, commercial, bottom line benefits, which I'll touch on later, that actually by pursuing sustainability and the reduction of your emissions, whether you get to net zero or not remains to be seen, there is genuine commercial, financial opportunities in doing so and benefits in doing so.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be financially viable for the company itself, isn't it? Really putting their practices in place and making big changes. Definitely got to improve all stakeholders. Thank you for that, Clive. Question to yourself, Barbara. So could you give an overview of the business plan in terms of net zero and what have been some of the key areas that will take more time to put into practice, please?
Yeah, certainly. So at Young Spirits, sustainability is definitely at the heart of our operations. As I mentioned earlier, we are carbon neutral since 2023. And achieving net zero emissions is really a critical part of our long-term strategy. When we were developing our net zero business plan, we looked at this across 3 areas. So measuring emissions, reducing emissions, and offsetting emissions. So if I look kind of at the measuring emissions side, we've very much undertaken a really comprehensive audit of our carbon footprint. And that's across scope 1, so direct emissions from our production facilities and our operations. And we've swapped out our business vehicles to electric vehicles and introduced charging points for those vehicles and for staff. For scope 2, we've very much looked at the indirect emissions in terms of energy usage, such as electricity. And then scope 3, looking at the indirect emissions again in relation to our supply chain, including all of the raw materials, the transportation and product life cycle. So I think this foundation has really allowed us to target reductions in a systematic way and to focus in the areas where we believe would be the greatest impact. If I go to the reducing emissions aspect of our plan, in this area, we've looked at sustainable packaging in particular. So continuing to innovate with the materials that we use, such as recyclable and lightweight packaging. So our Nips and Sips brand, it's fully recyclable pouches, which reduce the emissions in production and in distribution. And then also as part of reducing emissions, we've considered a renewable energy transition. So utilising solar panels, moving towards 100% renewable energy supply. And we're trying to widen that approach further by setting up our innovation hub. So this is where we focused on new product development, helping our clients to look at sustainable solutions in order to reduce their own environmental footprint. And we're very much sharing our learnings with our bottling clients to explore those possibilities. And then finally, what we've also tried to do is look at offsetting our emissions. And that has been through a partnership with a company called Make It Wild. So we've supported their rewilding and reforestation projects. And our staff have actually had an opportunity to contribute directly by planting trees and doing elements of that rewilding. So very much focusing efforts then on the carbon sequestration and supporting biodiversity as we continue to work on that, reducing those unavoidable emissions. And then to the other part of your question, Matt, about areas that need more time to implement, I think all of us today, we've chatted, have acknowledged that we are very much on a journey, and I'm sure you'll hear that across what we're saying. So for our company, it's very much scope 3 as part of our supply chain, which are a bit of a work in progress. Scope 3 requires us to really form much deeper collaboration with suppliers and partners in the supply chain so that we align our practices with theirs. And that we're able to kind of commit together and jointly to making more progress. And we do have some circular economy practices in place. We've got a repurposing of some of our whisky casks with a charity called Move On. But again, widening those circular practices will take time. So I guess just kind of summing up, it's a strategy that's focused on looking at measurable action combined with innovation in order to achieve net zero emissions. But as a business, very much committing to that change.
Okay, yeah, very in depth. You're absolutely right, Barbara. It's a journey, definitely, but seems like quite clear and quite in depth in the plan that you're going to be putting in place. But yeah, thank you for that. Richard, please. So, have you seen a big shift in focus from your customers within the food and drink sector in order to reach net zero, and how are they putting these into place?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Matt. I think there has been a big shift in how our customers especially are looking at sustainability and getting to net zero. I think it's been driven by a mix of things. So there's kind of regulation, which is a thing that's forcing people down a path. There's pressure from customers to be more sustainable. And to be honest, as Clive already pointed out, there's that financial benefit that may also be realised by going down that kind of path towards sustainability. I think more and more food and drink businesses especially are realising that sustainability isn't just that top tick box exercise. It is something that can help them thrive into the long term. So if I look at that and the kind of areas that people are focusing on, I think there's probably 3 or 4 kind of key areas. And the first one I would say is that organisations are looking at data to make better decisions. So businesses are turning to tools like warehouse management and supply chain software to really dig into their kind of operational kind of practices, so they can understand things such as where's energy being used, how do we optimize the delivery routes, and better managing stock, so they can see where the impact is on their kind of carbon footprints. And data's enabling them to do that in a much more effective manner than maybe they have been able to historically. I think another big area that's coming to the fore, and Barbara just touched on it as part of the Scope 3 kind of conversation there, is working much more closely with suppliers. Businesses want to know that their suppliers are on board with their kind of goals and that they're actually aligned. So it's, be that whether that's on packaging waste, sourcing more locally, or even ethical standards, that is becoming more and more important. So you want to make sure your suppliers are on board with you there. And we believe, again, that technology forms a key plank in that kind of relationship. So you can actually see what's happening and use the data again to build on better, stronger relationships. But I think the most interesting area for me that I've seen has been the cultural shift. It's great having all these initiatives and doing all these kind of things and using technology for better decision making. But if you haven't got the right culture, you're never going to get there. So for me, seeing that organisations, the leadership of organisations are really beginning to drive sustainability in their businesses, rather than it being just 1 or 2 people sat in a corner, there's now an effort on the business to drive that kind of path across all the departments, be that ops, be that marketing, sales, finance, getting them all aligned. And I think that's been something that's really been quite interesting to see. And having the right kind of tools in place allows them to more easily track what's going on, measure the progress, and also then be able to share the details of the success, and externally. So I think that's they're the kind of big areas that we've seen things happening over the past few years.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. No, culture is definitely key as well. But also what you said about data, like having accurate data allows you to identify where changes need to be made and putting practices into place to make that modification into it. But thank you. That's the first questions done. Just to remind everybody who's attended, I've had a couple of questions come in already, but again, use the icon at the bottom of your page to type in any questions you can, and I'll address those in the Q&A part. So question 2, I'll put this one first to you, Barbara. So Barbara, is there a key example of one area of change in Young Spirits have already put into place to reach net zero, and what other successes have stemmed from that?
Yeah, I think one of the significant areas for us has been implementing some changes around sustainable packaging solutions. I think for us, it was recognising that packaging does contribute significantly to our carbon footprint. So we've prioritised very much the use of recyclable, lightweight and environmentally friendly materials. We've also tried to focus on local sourcing. I think Richard mentioned that as well, and working with those key trusted suppliers to try and align our own sustainability goals with theirs. And in terms of success, I think the shift has not only helped us to reduce waste and transportation emissions, but it's also helped us to raise awareness amongst our bottling clients. So by championing sustainable solutions for our own brands, we've encouraged many of our clients to rethink their own packaging strategies. So very much creating that ripple effect and hopefully, extending wider across clients and the rest of the industry. I think it's also helped us to stay ahead of some of the regulatory change that's coming into play. I'm referring here particularly to supporting compliance around extended producer responsibility, EPR. So this is legislation that requires producers to take responsibility for the life cycle of their packaging and include data measurement and reporting as part of that kind of key aspect of compliance. I think while we have actually made some great strides, there's obviously back to the journey point. We're on a journey. There's still challenges that we require to overcome and that require continuous effort. So I think in that area, probably one of the challenges for us that we've seen is that piece around material availability and cost. So finding affordable, high quality, sustainable materials that both meet regulatory and aesthetic standards is a challenge, particularly if you're producing a really premium brand like Bergen Harris. And as we work through our net zero initiatives, we're also really mindful and careful in terms of our comms in relation to greenwashing. So we want to position ourselves correctly. We don't want to kind of fall into any of those pitfalls. And again, I've probably stated it quite a lot, it's the supply chain piece. So ensuring that every stage from material sourcing to disposal meets sustainability goals requires a lot of commitment and partnership. I think one of the reasons we implemented our innovation hub was to address some of those challenges and to look to provide solutions for our wider clients. This is basically trying to build sustainability into the design from the outset and collaborating on new product development. So we've tried to support clients with their own sustainable packaging solutions and thereby meet their own environmental goals. And I think we hope that by doing some of this with our clients and some of this work, we can also help them with the regulatory piece as well to make sure that they're also remaining compliant. So I think we've done a lot in terms of packaging solutions, the innovation hub, but again, being mindful that there's legislation that comes into place and that could change quite quickly, but again, hoping to stay on top of all of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's a learning curve anyway, isn't it? This journey you're on. But like you said about a ripple effect as well, because it's sort of like raising awareness for other stakeholders, but also your suppliers, your customers, etc. They can all learn from obviously what different companies are doing and probably introduce it themselves as well. Okay, thank you for that, Barbara. Richard, I'll put the next question to you. So, do you have any big projects that your customers have undertaken to change their current operational processes, and what have they done? Specify like one example or two.
Yeah, I think big projects. I think everybody sees sustainability as being big projects, actually, about those big ticket kind of items, and they are quite often. You can do some great stuff, but that takes quite a lot of upfront kind of investment. But I think there's also incremental projects that you can do in the business. And I thought about that before I came today, and I'd like to just bring up a couple of projects that we've done with customers that are not big bang, but they've had a significant impact on their business. So looking at the first one, we've been working with a major wholesaler for many, many years, and like a lot of organisations, implemented route optimization software many years ago integrated it with our solution, and they got that benefit immediately of having the best routes, reducing the operating cost, reducing the amount of fuel they used, which was something that people actually did before sustainability was a big thing. It was just about reducing the cost. And
Yeah.
that's worked really, really well for them. But as we moved on over time, we've actually worked with this organisation, and we've now been able to take that one step further. So we know they've optimised the routes, we know they've reduced the cost as much as they can the way they've done. So what we've done is we've worked with them to look at how they can compress the loads in the warehouse. So when they're actually building the loads. So what that's actually meant for them, that they can push more drops onto fewer vehicles, putting them out on the road, so therefore less routes. So that's had another further benefit for them, that they've reduced the number of miles that they're covering quite significantly, therefore reducing the fuel required, reducing the energy consumption, and that's been great. And that's one kind of project. And one of the other little kind of small sustainable impacts that project's had is that because they have had fewer vehicles on the road, where they deliver, which tends to be in urban areas, there's slightly less congestion. I'm not going to say it's all gone, but there's slightly less congestion than there used to be. So there's quite a number of different impacts. And that was just by implementing a change to how they actually built the loads for going out the back door. I think looking at a second example is we've been working with a distributor who've been implementing predictive analytics to manage energy consumption in the warehouse. As we know, warehousing can be quite an expensive thing and quite an energy consumer, especially if you take into account things like refrigeration and climate control. So by using data from Internet of Things sensors, IoT sensors, they've been able to gain some very interesting insights into their operations, and it's allowed them to change their kind of working practices. So, for example, they've been able to move some high energy tasks to the night time where the electricity costs are cheaper, so the loading on the network's less. So things like that. They've also been able to improve the insulation within the warehouse so that it's much more effective than it was. So overall, in their first year of doing these kind of quite minor changes, really, in the big scheme of things, they're looking at a 15% energy consumption saving, which is quite a significant thing. So those two projects, although not big huge things, have had a dramatic impact on both those businesses.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. It doesn't have to be a big change to start with. It can be like small, integral cogs that changing still have a big impact on the business. But I do remember reading an article a while ago in terms of like sort of a lot of vehicles on the road with empty trucks, aren't there? So heavily reducing that around the country, really, which has been quite successful. Seems to be anyway. But no, thanks for that, Richard. And Clive, question to you now, please. So what would you say are some of the key, most significant changes that have been made and put in place, and what's been the result of these in one of your member companies, please?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think just picking up on across what Barbara and Richard have said is that there needs to be this is a collaboration, isn't it? You talk about customers and suppliers. A number of our members have seen, when they go for tenders or are issuing tenders, then sustainability. Well, what's your sustainability policy and goals? So just picking up on that point, that's a change where, tenders being issued and companies who wanting to engage with another party and wanting to know what their policies are and goals are around the issue of sustainability. So there definitely is a desire and need to work collaborative around it. Taking Richard's point about kind of small steps, I'm going to refer now to a fairly large step a business has taken. But coming back to the point, if we all together make small steps cumulatively, that's a big impact. So I think don't be focused on the big, as Richard says, big projects. Focus on small steps and maybe what's achievable in the short term, and then build from there. Coming back to one of our major or larger members, then they've taken a leap. They've been on this path for say 10 to 15 years, but they're now they've undertook a major investment to the tune of 13 million. But that's not in terms of just reducing their consumption. it's about generating their own energy. So they invested. So this is another take on this: is where do we go and how do we address this? I mean, now they invested heavily in solar paneling across their network of properties. You know, heat pumps, wind turbines. They've invested in and now generating or creating a battery storage capability to store that energy they're generating. So coming back to my earlier point about this being a commercial or financial opportunity, they're making real bottom line benefits by generating their own energy and consuming that energy, not selling it back to the grid, because by all accounts, the grid's paying peanuts. But it's so major savings by generating their own energy and consuming that energy. So I think that is a significant change within their business and a different way of looking at this.
Yeah, definitely. It's just no, very good points there made, and thank you for your answers to those questions. I think it is key to say, isn't it? We all know it's a long journey, and there are many actions to take to try and be more sustainable to hit this net zero goal. Whether it's small changes or big changes, you say, Rich, like big bang approaches, they've all got a contributing impact on it. But again, it is a learning curve. Something that not everybody, I'll say most people, aren't necessarily 100% sure on what is next to do, but obviously it all helps in listening to these webinars, listening to how other people are approaching different things in the sector you're in as well, but also other sectors as well that might have a contributing impact on being more sustainable in general. But no, thank you all for your responses to those. Hope people have found it useful. We have had some questions come through on the Q&A section, which I will read through and pick out the ones to ask the relevant person if you've put a person on them. But keep on putting them through, because I'll try and cover as many as I can. So the first one is actually for you, Clive. So let me just guess what. So what have some of your members found challenging with regard to making changes, and how have these been addressed?
Good question, actually. But and again, referring back to the feedback I've had from the members, is that one of the large or biggest challenges has been government agencies being aligned with political rhetoric or government rhetoric. I won't give specific examples of which departments are being pointed at, but I think there is a general feeling, or certainly feedback I've got, is that those agencies are not always aligned with the political and government rhetoric, and that's proven to be a challenge. They've been overcome, and probably over a period of time, members have been able to address those issues. But that's come across loud and clear in terms of that. So I think there's some work to do for the political or governments, parties, whatever, to align and get everybody kicking the ball in the right direction, which is often an analogy we use. And we haven't got someone kicking it left field or right field. It's all, we need to work together, to collaboratively work together to achieve the objectives. And I think touching on the point as well you just raised, it's knowledge and understanding as well. That's come across as well. Is that certainly people looking to progress down this journey is a lack of knowledge and understanding. So I think there's an educational piece there as well that needs to be addressed, and that will help the momentum of getting traders and businesses not only on this journey, but moving forward down that and through that journey.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's knowing what to do, isn't it? We all know what the ultimate goal is, really, but with changing regulations, etc., it's just trying to put the right thing into place to make those beneficial changes. Thank you for that, and hope that answered the question for who asked it. Thank you. Barbara, got one here for you, please. So you work across a range of international markets. Have there been any conflicting circumstances you've experienced following the changes you have made?
Yeah, I think just kind of summing up, obviously we're all focused on sustainability, and sustainability goals are universally important. But I think working in different regions has highlighted a number of varying priorities, particularly around differences in scope emissions, different regulations and consumer expectations. And that can lead to conflict and trying to wonder which way is the best route to go, or whether you should adapt your strategy. I think just to give one example from our own industry is that perception to plastic. So retailers, multiple retailers in the UK, the big supermarkets, are increasingly focused on eliminating plastic. So very much creating a demand for alternative materials. However, what we're finding is this conflicts with the practical benefits of lightweight plastic in terms of reduction of emissions during transport. And then if you're working in the Nordics, prioritising lightweighting of materials are seen very much as a sustainable strategy, and they are emphasising lower carbon emissions from transportation. So the UK and the Nordics are slightly out of sync. And interestingly, while the UK supermarkets are trying to phase out plastic, the Nordic markets are very much viewing plastic as a solution, much more efficient and a much more sustainable material, as long as it's been managed responsibly. So I think as a business, we are balancing trade-offs. So where conflicting priorities arise, we're having to balance regional needs and international needs with our own broader net zero goals. So having to find solutions through choice of materials, transport options, or plastic-free alternatives if we're working in markets like the UK. I think that ensures that we're offering clients informed decisions, choice based on their target audience and their sustainability commitments. However, navigating across international markets basically has shown us that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And I think also if you factor in, again, back to EPR and plastic elimination, that emphasising of lightweighting and plastic for the Nordics illustrates the complexities that we can achieve, that we're struggling to achieve in terms of net zero. So again, very different focus on which scope to pursue. So I think generally, when developing a net zero strategy, companies are having to balance diverse priorities while staying true to their own commitments. And hopefully that answers an element of your question.
Yeah, and I hope it answers to the person asked it. But that is quite tricky, isn't it? If you try to, if there are conflicts from border to border and stuff, so supplying a good in one area might not, match the requirements that you're selling into a different area. Okay, that is quite interesting, that one. But thank you for Barbara. And a question for you, Richard, please. So have you come across any issues with regards to the changes in operational processes, and how business handling these with pressures from all stakeholders?
Right, that's an interesting question. I think there's probably quite a few elements to this. I think there's always going to be challenges when you're implementing any kind of operational change. But I think most organisations can manage that change. They've been doing it for years, running the businesses. So it's no different from any other kind of challenge. But I think one of the biggest issues we've seen is quite often balancing those short-term costs against the long-term gains that you can get implementing a practice. So, for example, as Barbara was talking about before, upgrading the fleet to electric is quite a huge upfront cost, and it can be quite difficult to get the balance between those looking for a short return on investment, i.e. finance and the like, and also those looking maybe on the operational side, looking at that long-term sustainability. So that's kind of one of the areas, that kind of balancing kind of act. I think there's also the challenge around, or issue around data. We've dealt with quite a few organisations, and quite often they're starting out on this journey and they haven't really got in place the kind of an understanding of what their current carbon footprint is. They haven't actually they've got great intentions, but they haven't really measured where they are today, and that makes things quite difficult to set realistic goals and measure progress against those goals. So I think our role as a technology provider is to help them overcome that issue by giving them those kind of tools so that they can actually work out where they actually are today, so they know where they want to get to tomorrow. So that's another kind of issue. I think there's also the pressure, there's the external pressures as well. So your customers, again, they're into sustainability. So ensuring that what you say, you talk about, you actually do. Again, I'll come back to some of the good examples that Barbara put forward and the solar power that Clive was talking about. They show that you're actually doing something. Well, don't communicate that to your customers. They don't understand what's actually happening. And you've also got to communicate that back up the chain to the regulators so that they can actually see that you are doing what you said you'd do and you're making a meaningful impact. So I think that communication issue is a really challenging one. But overarching, I'll go back to my first kind of a topic that we talked about, is that collaborative approach within a business. You know, the fact that the cultural change that's actually needed is going to be driven from the top. And quite often, you know, getting cross-functional support rather than just individual department support is key to actually helping you actually achieve what you want to achieve. So I think they're the kind of issues that we've seen, the big issues. I mean, there's plenty of other small ones, but they're the big ones. And I think if you can master those kind of areas, you're probably on the road to success. I'll not say easily, but you're certainly on the road to success.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's pleasing all stakeholders as well, isn't it, with trying to put something in place. But you've kind of answered, partly answered this question. Another one's come through actually for you, Richard. But in terms of the increasing amount of data that's available and being stored, that's out there, but by systems used, obviously we implement it into companies. How is it? What is the process of focusing on a certain bit of data and trying to ignore the rest of it? So how can this be easily managed?
I think you need some skill to manage the data. People think having a huge pool of data, that's the answer. You could just actually getting insights out of the data is kind of quite a skillful process. It's not something that's easily done. So I think, without going into all the detail of it, having clear objectives of what your end goal is, what is it you want to achieve, and then working backwards from there to actually reason what data you actually need to work. If you start off with a pool of data and say, right, how can I get to some objectives, you're thrashing around for a long time. But we found that if you start from the other end with what's the end goal, what's the objective, what do we actually want to look at doing, and then we can work backwards through the data to find which, because it can be quite granular at times, which elements best support what you want to measure.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with that. But and one last question here, actually. So, I mean, there is a genuine desire to reach net zero and be more sustainable. But I'll put this on two barrels. So, how is your organisation? You said what the sort of like the scope is going forward, but do you see any difficulties coming out of this, or is it just like different regulations that's coming from, as you said, like different rules in different markets make it challenging? But how do you think you're going to adapt to those when those come about?
I think there's as I said, I think there's a genuine desire to reach net zero generally. Yeah. I do think, I'm sure Clive will also comment to this from our BWA members. I think the challenge is that piece of there's so many differing approaches and which area to focus on first. And I think, again, going back to the journey piece, it is very much of a commitment to measuring and understanding, following the data, measuring and working out where do you go from there to improve to take you towards that real net zero. I'm not sure that's happening in my time within the business, but I would like to think that we've at least embarked on a journey, and by measuring, then we're on the right path.
Yeah, definitely. Clive, can you echo that from your members that you discussed?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think it's, you need to embrace it. It's like anything, isn't it? The business, I mean, taking Richard's point earlier as well about culture, you've got to embrace this, okay? And it's not, allocating somebody, not even on the exec team, but say middle management, say, well, sustainability is your responsibility. You can't do that. I mean, maybe in the past that could have been, and that was applied to many issues, I suspect. But I think that from the top down, you've got to embrace. If you're going to do this now, and people taking the point, which route do you go down? How successful will you be? I think everybody has a duty of care to step onto the journey. How far you get, well, that depends on a number of factors. Not only, and some of those are outside of one's own control. I mean, not to go off piste here, but Donald Trump going to tear up. He's going to take the US on a totally different route, and what the global impact on that is going to be remains to be seen. So there's other factors at play here, but I think from a business perspective, I think we all have that, and on an individual level, we have a duty of care, and it's and when we need to embrace this. And time will tell how successful we will be. But I think taking Barbara's point, you got to find a direction to travel really, and pursue that to the best of your abilities, and taking on board expert guidance and advice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, commercially, there's a common goal, isn't there? Anyway, to be more sustainable. Anyway, but you're right. With different size organisations, some large organisations have a department centered around being more sustainable, so that they've dedicated the time to do that, to make those changes. Obviously, for some smaller SME companies, it's probably more of a big process to make the changes and trying to find the right time and the knowledge to implement those, and to identify what changes they need to make it and where and when. But thank you for that. I'm aware time's almost over, and I understand you've all got busy schedules to continue with, but big thank you to our panel. So Barbara, Clive and Richard, thank you again for your responses.
Pleasure.
And thank you for the time for all those that have attended today's session. Hope you found it useful. As you can see on the backgrounds, we have our email addresses. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask them, I'm sure they don't mind if you email them directly, or you can email myself and I can forward them on to the relevant people, or personal people. But big thank you for all. Hope you have a good rest of the day, and hopefully see you at the next webinar we do. Thank you all.